Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. I am sharing some cards made using Love from Lizi's With Love 8x8 paper pack. When Lizi first showed me a peek of this paper collection, I had to have it. I mean, look at all of that pink. It's just beautiful. There are 16 sheets of 8x8 paper, and half of them have a specialty feature on them, like a spot gloss or pearlescent paper. And then one of the sheets includes all of these fun cut aparts. So I went ahead and pulled out some peel offs. That's my little case holding one of each of all of my colors, and then I just chose some colors that I thought would coordinate well with the paper pack, even though I ended up only using about 4 different ones. So I'm going to go ahead and start with card number 1. I'm using one of my favorite sketches. This is Operation Right Home sketch number 219. The background paper is just some white pearlescent paper, and then I'm going to layer all of it with just some dark navy blue cardstock. So I have 2 different pattern papers, and this is a fun sketch since you can combine 2 of them. And then for that little strip going across the card, I'm using one of the cut aparts that has a sentiment on it. And then just to make sure it stays put on my card, I did adhere it using a little bit of score tape. So now I'm just trying to decide which color peel off to use. I first pulled out the mint green glitter peel offs because I thought it would look really nice with that green sentiment, and then I changed my mind and moved on to the matte silver. I believe I'm using the narrowest width of the peel offs because there's always 3 different sizes that are included on the sheet. And then I'm just tucking the ends behind the card front, and I'll just put some adhesive on there and then put that on my card base. And I've already gone ahead and cut out a stitched circle die cut along with that scallop circle die cut to mat it. And I did use the background paper to cut out that scallop circle die just to save on paper. And then just a finishing touch, I'm just adding 3 small stitched circle die cuts in that upper corner. And I did end up making 3 cards because there were 3 of these little sentiment strips included on that one cut apart sheet. So now on to the next card. So I am going to use this fun heart embossing folder, and I just used one of the pink pattern papers. It kind of has an ombre look to it for that larger square of the sketch. And then this is all pattern paper, but what's fun about this paper pack is several of the sheets are just like a single color or just like a real muted design on them. So this green paper sort of has a watercolor look to it, so it was really pretty. And then this time I did use those mint green iridescent glitter peel offs. And I just put little partial pieces because most of it is going to be covered up with this large square. And for this card, I'm matting all of it in black cardstock. So I'm going to be using one of the little sentiment cut aparts, and it's orange. And since there's a little bit of orange in that background paper, I decided to pull in some of this orange twine. And this twine is actually from Love from Lizi's April kit. It included a whole bunch of different twine colors, and so I still had some left, and I thought it would be perfect to tie in with this card. I wrapped the twine around that top of the card twice and then just adhered the ends with a little piece of score tape, and then I'm just going to tie a little bow up in that upper left hand corner. And I'll just go ahead and add some ATG on the back of this pink square. I just love that little heart embossing folder. Added some nice texture to this card. And then there's my little sentiment that was one of the cut aparts. And I'll just pop that up using some foam dimensional tape. So it's kind of perfect how that orange just really ties in well with the orange twine. And then just a finishing touch, I'm going to use some sequins from a previous Love from Lizi kit. I believe this was the January one. I think it's the Rainbow Wishes. It's just a iridescent sequin mix, so it goes with everything. So I'm just going to put a few of them in the lower corner. And since I did have one more of the little square cut aparts, I made a total of 2 cards using this sketch. So now moving on to the next card. This is Freshly Made Sketches number 310. And one thing I love about this background paper is this design is double-sided. So it was fun to have this wood grain on the one side, which I'll use as the main background, and then also using the same paper, just the opposite side, with this lovely floral design for that larger rectangular box. And then for kind of my sentiment box, I'm just using some more of that pink paper with that ombre look to it. And then just to add a little bit of interest on the left-hand side, I'm using some of the clear silver mirror peel-offs. And I'm using one of each of the sizes. And these are just beautiful. They're actually clear in the center, and then on the edges it has like a silver foil. And Lizi also sells them in gold. So they've become some of my favorite peel-offs to use lately. This paper collection is definitely more on the feminine side. And then one way I wanted to sort of soften this sketch, because it's sort of on the boxy side with all the rectangles and squares, is to round just the bottom two corners. Although I did decide not to round the actual card front this time. And then for the sentiment, again, just to sort of soften up this card, I went with an oval instead of that square. And this is actually cut from the same pink paper. It was just the lower side of that ombre paper. So it's kind of nice to have just a different pink tone. And then for the sentiment, I'm using some green pearlescent paper, and I just used the thank you die that was included in a previous Love from Lizi kit. And then again, I pulled out those Rainbow Wishes sequins just to add a little extra detail to the card. So I'm going to put 2 of them in the upper corner near the sentiment, and then 3 of them on the lower part of the card. And the one nice thing about using 8x8 paper, I was able to get 2 card backgrounds as well as those 2 floral pieces out of one sheet. So I did end up making 2 cards using this sketch. And if you are interested in any of the card sketches I share, including the measurements, I do have all of that over on my coordinating blog post, and that link is in the description box below. So now moving on to the next card. I'm using another sketch that I love and I repeat all the time. This is Sweet Sunday sketch number 220. The background paper is fairly similar to the previous card. It has the wood grain, although this one has a hint of sort of a green color to it, and then it has all these lovely flowers on it. And since I don't want to put too many busy pattern papers together, I chose a tone-on-tone design for that smaller rectangular piece. And then the cut-apart sheet had a couple of these longer, narrow sentiments. So this one's beautiful with the florals on it, and most of the cut-aparts have like a hint of that spot gloss on them. So this one has adorable. And then just to add a little more interest, I put just one of the peel-offs on the bottom part of the sentiment. And then changing up the sketch just a little bit, so I'm going to use one of the hearts from the pattern paper, and I'm just doing a simple fussy cut, leaving a little bit of an edge around there. And so I'm just trying to figure out where I wanted to place it. I had first thought about putting it in where that circle would be on this sketch, but I didn't like the look. So instead I'm just going to have it a little bit off to the side, and I just popped it up using some foam dimensional tape. And then just one final touch, I'm going to add just a little banner in the upper corner. And then I figured I just needed a little bit more, so I'm using some of the Nuvo glitter drops. This is the White Blizzard color, and I just added 3 of them right below the sentiment, kind of on the left-hand side. So once again, I did make 2 cards using this sketch. I love the variety of the sentiment cut-aparts. They're included in this paper collection. So now moving on to the next card. This is MFT sketch number 429. And I printed it a little while ago, and it kind of intimidated me. I wasn't sure what to do with all of these triangles. But then I remembered I have this fun little stitched triangle die set. So I thought I'd go ahead and cut out just some different sizes using some of the pattern paper pieces that were left over. So for the background, this is some of this kind of like a honeycomb look, a little hexagon. It's a pearlescent paper. It kind of has a pink peach look to it. And then I matted it in some of this dark blue cardstock. And at first I was going to try to do it without layering all of those triangles, but it just didn't look right to me. So you know me, I have to add my layers. So I'm just using some of the scraps of that blue cardstock. And the easiest way to layer them, for me anyway, is to just line them up against one of the flat edges of the cardstock and then just bring my trimmer over and just visually see where that edge is going to be and then just cut it from there. The nice thing about this trimmer is you can cut just really small pieces off easily. So that's all I'm doing, is adding some layers. There's a couple of them. The one side was a little too wide, so I just went back in and trimmed it. One tip if you are using a trimmer to cut these little slivers off is to make sure to hold tightly on that little finger guard bar. That way your paper doesn't shift when you're cutting. So now I'm going to go ahead and add a little sentiment. There's these tiny little sentiment boxes that were part of the cut-aparts. And so I found one of Love from Lizi sentiments that has best wishes that fit perfectly inside there. Unfortunately, I didn't get it centered, like top to bottom as well as I would have liked, but it's straight, so I'm okay with it. So now I'm just going to go ahead and lay out all of those triangles on my card. And I don't have the same size as what's pictured on the sketch, but I was okay with it since I didn't have to go and cut all these triangles myself. I just used a die. And I decided to pop up just a couple of them just to add a little extra interest. So I'm popping the dark blue triangles on the top as well as the bottom. And then for the rest, I'll just add some ATG. And then I was trying to figure out where I wanted to put this sentiment. The sketch isn't really designed to have the sentiment on there, so you definitely get to be creative and put it where you want. And I did like it in this lower corner, just over one of the floral triangles. And then just to add that little extra detail, I'm going to use some more of the Rainbow Wishes sequins. And I just put 2 of them in that lower corner near the sentiment, and then 3 of them in the upper corner. So again, since I did use 8x8 paper and I still had another piece of this background sheet, I did make 2 cards using this sketch. And I do just want to mention, whenever I'm using papers that have that shiny or pearlescent look to them, the video coloring is just a little bit off. So I do provide these still photos so you can have the actual color. So now on to the next card design. This is MFT sketch number 425. This floral background paper is one of my favorites in the whole paper collection. It's just bright and cheerful, and I love the little hints of some of this brighter green color. This green paper that I'm using for this rectangular strip has a very subtle tone-on-tone design. It kind of looks like fabric, like a burlap. And so I just want to add a little more interest to it. So I'm using the mint green iridescent glitter peel-offs. So I'm just using the narrowest pieces and just kind of putting a diagonal design all across that whole rectangular piece. So I'm just using like one piece going across, cutting it off, like leaving a little bit on the end just because I'm going to tuck that behind. And I'm not measuring, so these aren't perfectly the same distance apart. But so I'm just eyeballing it and it works fine for me, and I just love the little extra sparkle that it's going to add to this card. Since this card has all those lovely florals on it, it just needed a little extra sparkle. So now that I have all of those cut out, I'm just going to tuck all of those little ends in behind. And there's a few of them I had to trim a little bit shorter since I don't want those pieces to pop around on the other side. So even though it may look like I used quite a few of my peel-off strips, I actually didn't. I think I only used about 3 different pieces along with some of the little scrap leftovers. So it's just a nice way to add just a little extra detail or interest on maybe a plain cardstock instead. So another way you could also just trim the edges instead of tucking them behind, but I decided to tuck them this time, and that way I could put some ATG along the edge and make sure to really seal them in between that pattern paper and the cardstock. So now I've gone ahead and used one of the sentiment cut-aparts, and then for that little banner, on the sketch it comes around the front of that little rectangular piece, but I'm going to have it go behind. So I'm just using a little piece of some of the glitter cardstock that was in a previous add-on Love From Lizi kit. And I'm just going to add a little bit of foam dimension on both of the ends, just because it's going over that green piece and I didn't want it to sag anywhere. And then same with this little sentiment box, I'm just going to add some of these little foam squares just on the top and the bottom, just to go over that glitter cardstock, because that cardstock does have a little bit of thickness to it. And then just to make sure it's going to stay in place, I did put a little bit of liquid adhesive just for where it's going to sit on top of that glitter paper. This card just makes me so happy with all of the pink and the extra glitter and sparkle on it. It's definitely one of my favorite cards. So then just a little finishing touch, I pulled out those Rainbow Wishes sequin mix again. I'm just going to add a couple of them in the lower corner as well as the upper corner. And since I don't have a lot of the pattern paper left over, I actually only made one of these cards this time. It's always fun to hear which card is everybody's favorite, since it's usually not necessarily the one that I love the most, but I enjoy reading all of those comments. So now moving on to the next card. This is MFT sketch number 347, and I actually selected this sketch based on this cut apart. I loved this sentiment. I love making memories with you. So it's a really long sentiment. It's actually longer than the width of a card, but I knew I was going to use it and I was going to make it work. So I started with this I Love You pattern paper for the background, and I actually decided to do a double mat. So there's a little bit of this pearlescent pink paper first, and then just some of this darker pink cardstock for the matted layers. And then I'm going to just use some more of that pink ombre paper for kind of a semicircle. It's a little bigger than that for this little background. And then I went and added the pink layering onto this sentiment piece, and then just laid it across the whole card, making sure I wasn't going to cut off any of the words, and then just trim the edges so it was flush with the card. So even though I lost just a little bit of some of the floral or that little washi tape look on the one side, I think it turned out really nice. So then just to add a little extra decoration to this card, I just used some more of the solid pink cardstock and a stitched flower die, actually two of them. And I'm just going to add them in that upper corner. And I also used some more of that pattern paper, that green paper that has that fabric look, just for the leaves. So even though the sentiment cut apart already had all those florals, I think this just gave it a little bit more detail to it. And then I used some of that glitter cardstock for the center of the larger flower. And then I had to add my little banner in the upper left hand corner. There's just some things that I find I repeat a lot on my cards. I don't know, do you find that as well? I mean, I have my little banners or my 3 little circles, and then of course my glitter Nuvo drops, since I love this color so much. That bottle's about, I think, halfway gone now. So there is the finished card, and again I only made one since I only had one of those cut aparts. So now on to my next card design. This is Mojo Monday sketch number 443. So even though this paper collection has all of those navies and bright pinks, it also has some of these softer colors like this peach. So I love the variety even within one paper collection. So for the background paper, I'm just using this soft tone-on-tone design that has I love you and like love you sentiments all over it. And then I use some more of that pearlescent paper with the little hexagons. And then one of the cut aparts is this real sweet little always in my heart sentiment. So it has little hearts in the background And the colors match just beautifully with these other pattern papers, so I knew I wanted to find a sketch that I could tie all of those in together. So for the little banner, I was at first going to use this cardstock that I'm using for the layering, but I wanted just a little extra sparkle, so I just dug through my scraps of my Love From Lizi glitter paper and found this nice sort of a rose gold glitter. And so I just cut a little banner out of that, put it on the right hand side of that rectangular piece. And of course all of it's matted with kind of a peach cardstock. And then I'll just add those little finishing touches again with the Rainbow Wishes sequin mix. So overall this card's pretty quick, pretty simple, but it has a real soft, glittery look to it. It's real lovely. And then this Rainbow Wishes sequin mix actually has a couple little hearts in there. So I did pull out 2 of them, and they're all like an iridescent, but they do have like a slight different color. So I thought one of them looked a little more orange and the other a little more pink. So I thought that was fun to just add right near the sentiment. So there is my finished card. So now moving on to my next card design. This is Reverse Confetti sketch number 53. So at this point, I am out of all of the full sheets of pattern paper, but I have quite a few of the scraps left over, so I can still make just a few more cards. So for the background piece, I want to use this sort of plaid design with this navy blue, but I didn't have a big enough piece to go across the whole back. So I looked for a sketch that I could use part of it and be able to kind of hide that little cutout part that I don't have. So I'm going to have this stripe paper going right over that little gap in that background pattern paper. And then just to add a little extra shine, I'm using some of these silver mirror peel-offs. And I did put just a little piece of the blue cardstock in that gap just so it didn't sag down at all. So I just went ahead and adhered that all in place. And see, now nobody will have to know that there's actually a little missing piece of pattern paper there. And then I cut a banner out of this lovely pink pattern paper. And I'm just layering all of this again in some of this navy blue paper. So for that little thin strip that goes across the card, I decided to bring out some more of the white glitter paper and just cut it into a banner. And then the sentiment box is one of the cut-aparts that's included in the paper collection, and I'm actually going to have mine horizontal instead of the vertical position on the sketch. So I'm just looking for some sentiments. And so pulled out a few of the Love From Lizi stamps, and this has birthday wishes, and then it also has a sending. So I'm just trying to figure out a placement to see if I could get all 3 of those into this small little box. So kind of after playing with them and moving them around quite a bit, I did decide not to use the sending word. It just didn't fit very nicely in this box. So once I've decided not to use that stamp, I'm going to reposition the other 2 so they're basically centered in that box. So I am going to be heat embossing this sentiment. So I'm going to use Love From Lizi's silver Glitz color. It has lots of beautiful sparkle. So I just treated my paper with some anti-static powder, and then I'm just using some Versamark ink, stamping it several times to make sure I have a really solid impression. And then I'll get my embossing powder and just look at how beautiful and sparkly that is. So because it has some glitter in it, you always end up with just some extra little stray pieces, even after using the anti-static powder. So I'll just get my heat gun and get all of that heat set. And I know it's hard to see with my light reflecting on there. And so I'll use a lot of adhesive on the back just because it has been heat embossed and it sort of curls the paper up just slightly. And now I'll just go ahead and add that sentiment box to my card. And I did use just a few foam dimensional squares just to sort of even it out on my card. And then I noticed the one corner was still kind of sagging just a little bit, so I just popped another little foam square underneath that. And of course add one little banner in that upper corner. And then again, I'm going to pull out those Rainbow Wishes sequin mix, but then I changed my mind. I didn't actually like the color of it, so I pulled out another of the Lizi sequin mixes, and this was from last year's August kit. So it has gold and silver and black in there, and so I'm basically pulling out just the silver. So I thought it kind of stood out a little bit more than the Rainbow Wishes. So just putting a couple of them on the upper corner and 3 of them in the lower corner. I do tend to always add odd number of sequins just because it's a little more pleasing to the eye, I guess. So that is my final card, and again, I only made one using this sketch. So now on to my final card. I used Freshly Made Sketches number 311. So once again, I don't have any full sheets of the pattern paper left. So I looked for a sketch that would work well with the papers that I have remaining. So for this one, for the background, I just used 2 strips of this striped paper and then this wider pink strip for the main part of the card. And I could easily just hide that big gap by covering all that up, and then once again I did use just a piece of cardstock in between there just so that pink piece wasn't sagging anywhere. And then just to add some division between that pink heart paper and then the striped paper, I'm just using a few of the peel-offs. Another option would be to use some more of the cardstock. So for this card, I figured I needed to make a shaker card since I haven't made a shaker card this time. So I just cut out a stitched rectangular frame die, added some acetate to it, and now I just have my foam dimensional tape, folded that in half so I can start building up my shaker window. So I'm just cutting thin pieces so it's not hanging over the outside of this frame. So I did the outside, the longer 2 pieces first, and then I'll do these little shorter pieces. When I'm cutting all of these pieces to frame my shaker window, I try to get them pretty accurate so there aren't any little gaps at all, because you don't want to lose any of your little shaker components. But I did end up with some just teeny tiny little slivers, so I just cut another piece of the foam tape and kind of wedged it in there. It's not as big of a deal if you don't use really small shaker bits like glitter or anything, but it's still nice to fill it in just in case. So I'll just run some anti-static powder along the edge of the foam just to kind of help prevent these sequins from sticking. So again, I'm using the Rainbow Wishes, and I felt like I got too much in there, and once again, sorry about that reflection. It's just, I can't prevent it with my overhead lights. But then I wanted to add some pink. So this is a sequin mix, or I'm not even sure what this is, but it's something that I picked up at Michael's years ago, but it's a really pretty pink. So I decided to add just a little bit of that to the mix. And then I have that I Love You paper as the background. So go ahead and adhere that onto my card. I used lots of ATG because I want to make sure it doesn't come off. And then for that little circle element on the sketch, I decided to cut out a heart just using some solid cardstock. And then I used one of Love from Lizi Sentiment. This just says love. And I decided to emboss it using the Very Vanilla embossing powder. And so I think since I was trying to make sure to get a really good impression, I might have gotten too much ink. So when I embossed it, it kind of bled together, so it didn't have a lot of detail in the sentiment. But the color looked really nice. I mean, it's almost a white. It has just a little hint of more of a vanilla color versus a white. So I did change my mind and didn't use it. So I cut out another heart, cleaned up the love stamp, and then this time just stamped it in black. So now you can see the detail on that lovely script. And it's really fun how that stamp matches almost perfectly with the sentiment in the background on that pattern paper. So adhere that in place, and then again pull out my white Nuvo glitter drops, white blizzard. I just put a few of them on the bottom part of the card, and then also decorated the heart with just a few extra little polka dots. So I love how this one turned out, very bright and cheerful. And that is my final card. I ended up making a total of 16 cards using the With Love 8x8 paper pack by Love From Lizi. So here's just a quick recap of all 16 cards. So I did have a little bit of pattern paper scraps that are left over, so I could probably get a few more cards out of it. My goal this time was to do 10 different card designs. So some of them I did make 2 or 3 of, and then others I ended up only making 1. I will include links in the description box to the products used. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and make sure to give it a thumbs up. I always appreciate the support. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.